Welcome to the Salience Podcast, where we identify what stands out from all the noise.
Our guest today on the Salience Podcast is Kristy Hitchens. Kristy is the founder and chair of the Pink Belt Project, an Australian registered charity that aims to empower women in need by connecting them with the martial arts. Pink Belt is a peak body for women involved in martial arts and an authority on martial arts for violence prevention and recovery. In our book, Resilience by Design, we touch very briefly on resilience and domestic violence, noting both the appalling statistics of domestic violence in Australia and the challenge for getting out of such situations. Domestic violence affects both men and women, although it is a far bigger issue for women. A woman is murdered every few days in Australia by their partner or former partner. And we are a country of less than 26 million people. In addition, around 1 in 3 women have experienced violence since the age of 15. So clearly, there is a need to both prevent domestic violence and help people, mainly women, recover from domestic violence. So I'm excited to welcome Kristy to the Salience Podcast and for the opportunity to learn more about how the Pink Belt Project is helping with violence prevention and recovery. Welcome, Kristy.
Thanks, Ian. It's great to be here. I feel very honoured to be invited on the podcast. So thanks for having me.
Oh, great. So I'm going to start straight in. What led you to create the Pink Belt Project?
It was, I think, looking back on it now, it was kind of this chain of events that occurred that sort of led me to this place, almost like a perfect storm, I feel like. I turned 40. I often say I'm not sure if that had anything to do with it, but that was the timing. At that time in our family's life, we lost a family member, a close family member, to brain cancer. And as most people would understand who have been through something similar, it just changes your worldview a little bit. Questions of mortality and all those sorts of issues start to come onto the radar. For me in particular, it wasn't anything profound, like I suddenly felt like I needed to jump out of an aeroplane or anything like that, but it just gave me this heightened sense of how precious life is, and you've got to take opportunities when they come your way. And I sort of made this little deal with myself that over the next year or so, if opportunities came my way, instead of saying no or feeling like that was out of my comfort zone, whatever I was presented with, I would say yes. And the opportunity came very soon into the new year when the Taekwondo club that my son, who was about 10 at the time, I think, ran a women's self-defense course. So I decided to give it a go with this idea of just trying new things and taking on whatever sort of fell into my lap. Surprisingly, I absolutely loved it. We went for about 6 weeks. I really enjoyed the camaraderie among the women. There was about 20 of us. The women that I met, I just really enjoyed the environment and was very surprised by how much enjoyment I got out of punching and kicking pads. So as a result of that course, I ended up joining the Taekwondo club and training with my son. And so began my journey as a middle-aged martial artist and everything that goes with that. Fairly soon into the journey, I started to recognise changes in myself internally, in the way that I moved through the world, in the way that I presented myself at work, all these different little things which I felt I could tie back to the training that I was doing and learning how to defend myself. I'm a journalist by trade. I'm also a bit of a deep thinker, I suppose, and I like to pull apart these types of things. So I actually decided to start blogging about my journey as a martial artist, or middle-aged martial artist. And that gave me the opportunity to kind of research this phenomenon that I was experiencing as a result of my martial arts training, and to see if anybody else had experience the kind of changes internally that I was experiencing as a result of this training. What I found was this enormous body of research around the benefits of martial arts training for women. And that opened a bit of a Pandora's box for me, and I found it infinitely fascinating. But probably the most pivotal part of that entire story in terms of Pink Belt Project is that my training buddy at the time, I came to realise, was being affected by domestic violence. That was a real eye-opener for me. And so I started to tie the experience I was having at martial arts and the research that I was doing, and understand more deeply what it was offering my friend who was suffering in this way and how it could help her. So the Pink Belt Project really started with this very small seed of an idea that I wanted to help my friend who was impacted by domestic violence and at one point couldn't afford to come to training anymore because she left her violent marriage, set herself up independently, and couldn't afford to come back to training. So the initial idea was really just to create some kind of scholarship that would allow her to be able to come back to training. And yeah, that was the beginning of it. I spoke to people about the idea. I spoke to people about the connection that I'd made between martial arts and the benefits in the rest of your life. And it just kind of evolved from there. And people were fascinated by the idea. It evolved and changed and grew, and people got behind it. And for a while, I felt like I was just, along for the ride. But it really took off, and I had to start making some fairly critical decisions about where it was going to go and how much I could handle and what I wanted it to be. So that's how it all started.
Great. I really want to cycle back and hear more about what happened to your friend through the martial arts and what the benefits were. But before I go there, more broadly, so what is the Pink Belt Project? How do you offer scholarships? What's involved?
So we have we call them supporter clubs, martial arts clubs and instructors in every state and territory of Australia. And those clubs agree to provide a 1-year scholarship to a selected applicant. So they agree to cover all the costs associated with a year of training, uniform, a couple of classes a week, grading fees, everything. Pink Belt Project is kind of the conduit between the women in need and the clubs. So we raise awareness around the benefits of martial arts generally in the community. And then we empower the clubs to, through marketing and various tools like that, which enable them to promote in their local community the work that they're doing and the contribution they're making in this space. And that draws out applications, and we support them in awarding their scholarship to a particular applicant. We're also doing quite a bit of work in enhancing the instructor's knowledge around the neuroscience and exactly how martial arts can benefit as a tool for recovery from trauma, but also changes that we can make to the way that classes are run that will improve the outcome for our scholarship recipients. But the small sort of changes that we're recommending often benefit everyone in the class, not just someone who might be carrying trauma and things like that. So as you would be aware with your background in martial arts, classes are very traditional, steeped in tradition. Things are done in a certain way. And I guess we're just encouraging instructors to explore, while keeping hold of that sense of tradition, because that's part of what makes martial arts special, how we can evolve and sort of just tweak what we're doing to really enhance and amplify the positive effects that it can have. So yeah, that's part of the value add, I guess, of being involved in Pink Belt Project.
What are some of the small changes that you would introduce to some clubs?
There's various things. So some great examples that I find people come to understand very quickly So as I was saying, that things are very traditional in the training environment. We bow when we come in, we bow to the instructors. You bow when you enter the training floor and leave the training floor. I've been in classes, and this may not be the case for every martial arts club, but I have been in classes where if you want to go to the toilet, you have to go and ask the instructor, bow, and then leave the floor. What we've encouraged instructors to do is at the very start of the class, make it very clear to all the participants that if you need to leave the floor for any reason, whether it be to go to the toilet or because you might be having a panic attack, please do. Just go to the side, do whatever you need to do and come back in when you feel comfortable. And I think that just takes, it just increases the comfort for everybody, not only someone who might be carrying trauma, but anyone who's maybe approaching the class for the first time, and this is quite a foreign environment, just your natural level of nerves, all those sorts of things. So that's one example of how we can change things. Instructors who have been involved in martial arts, for decades, really long time, may have, because they are so immersed in what they do and so used to doing it, there are things that they might do without even thinking. So things like if you're going to demonstrate a self-defense maneuver, that before you, for instance, grab somebody's wrist to demonstrate a wrist lock, that you first ask permission. May I grab your wrist? Perhaps even explaining what you're about to do before you do it. All those sorts of things, particularly for a woman who's carrying trauma associated with violence, really, really important. So very small things that we can be doing to enhance, like I said, the positive stuff that's already there in a martial arts environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that. Just simple adjustments to some of the rituals that are associated with martial arts, like the bowing, asking permission, and asking permission and explaining what you're going to be doing in demonstrations. Absolutely, I think there's lots there for particularly some of the very traditional clubs that might have been practicing some of these things for a long time. And one of the beautiful things about martial arts is it's grounded in traditions that are often more than 2,000 years old, and they still evolve as well. There's still lots of contemporary neuroscience, there's sports conditioning, there's all sorts of things in there around high performance. So I really like this trauma-informed evolution, and I've not come across that before, so that's fantastic. Yeah, just going back to your friend, presumably she took up on the scholarship for a year and was able to continue her martial arts. What did you see there, or what sort of benefits did you see in her through martial arts?
I think particularly for her, there was a couple of different things. She was new to Australia, didn't have close family, didn't have a massive support network available to her, especially once she was now independent from her marriage. So what she had at Taekwondo was a community of supporters, friends. I think people talk a lot about how in martial arts, your martial arts friends become like your family. So she had an amazing support network, number one, there for her, inclusive, empowering, encouraging, all those sorts of things. The other thing for her, which I think was important, which I came to realise was part of the beauty of martial arts, is it gave her structure and a way forward. When something like that happens and the world seems chaotic, the martial arts environment, in all its tradition and repetition and structure, can feel very comforting for someone who's carrying trauma, or for anybody who's experiencing a level of stress in their world. When you come into the martial arts environment, you have this sort of embodied experience, and everything that's going on outside is left there for a while. It's almost like a kind of active meditation, I suppose. And even further than that, I think I always say that the belt rank system in martial arts, which is very common to whichever traditional form of martial arts you're doing, again, very structured process of personal and physical development. So it provides people with a way forward, something to work towards. It gives you that sense of achievement, perseverance. So that, I think, is so important and was important to my friend, I think, in the situation that she was in. The world outside of martial arts was in free fall. She didn't know what the future looked like, but a couple of times a week she could come to martial arts and she knew what she had to do, and it was just concentrating on that very next skill and developing that next skill. And then after a few weeks having a mini celebration because you got that little bit of sticky tape on your belt and achieved something, which I think is fantastic. And even for myself, that was part of what I saw as the beauty of it. Is I came to realize that I physically was capable of so much more than I thought, because I could see my progress, and you mark that progress so clearly as you move through the rank system. So those two things, the camaraderie and the kind of structure and system, I think really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely fundamental to the way that as professionals even we work with trauma and help people recover from trauma. Uh, Allowing people to reconnect with any sense of purpose is enormously valuable, especially if they've. We do a lot of work with trauma in frontline agencies, and sometimes they can't go back to work. So being able to reconnect with a new sense of purpose and a new family, a what a new place to belong. Two of the fundamentals of trauma recovery, right there. So yeah, what a great example. And I think there's something else you did too around providing the financial support while somebody's trying to get back on their feet. So often, domestic violence is characterized by manipulation of money and disempowerment. Uh, and that can be tricky to get out of. And this, how do you get out of those situations is something that I'd like to explore a lot more. I'd like to start exploring here. I think there are so many reasons that women and men stay in abusive relationships. At one end, there's love. And that's one end of the spectrum. There could be a sense of guilt of not wanting to leave, or there could be gaslighting involved. And right at the other end, of course, the extreme end is this threat of harm or even being killed by your partner. And so many, there are so many deaths every year, and I'm really curious if you've had any experiences or any conversations around how to manage what I call exit risk. You're in an abusive relationship. How do you get out in one piece? Have you had any thoughts on that?
I feel a little underqualified to tackle that topic. What I do know is there's a lot of research and a lot of the frontline agencies work with the knowledge that that period when a woman begins the process of starting to exit is the time when she is at the most threat of harm, and as we've seen over recent times, even death. So that's one part, and I'll make that point. I guess Pink Belt Project, we haven't had a great deal of exposure to that very critical stage of the process, because we're very much about reaching out and helping women once they've made that change. We're about helping them rebuild once they have made it to safe accommodation. Perhaps they've started a new job, working again, looking to rebuild their lives again following this traumatic experience. So we're less involved in that critical phase, I guess. And where we pick up the pieces is what we see is there's a lot of resources presented to somebody who's in that critical stage, but once they move into that more, so the acute stage and then the chronic stage, so that more long-term stuff, a lot of the supports fall away, and a woman is left to kind of rebuild again without a great deal of help or resources presented to assist in that space. So, and that's sort of where we pick up and come in and offer something that can help move forward after that process.
What have you seen in the long term for the women that you've been supporting? Have you heard any stories, or have you encountered some of that long term feedback?
Starting to get that. We've been going now for nearly 4 years, so starting to see and being able to collect some of that evidence around the outcomes of our scholarships. But I keep in touch with a lot of we're small enough now to do that. I can keep in contact with a lot of the scholarship recipients still, and have been able to sort of follow their journey, through Pink Belt and then out the other side. So starting to gather some great stories and evidence that we can use going forward to show some of the outcomes. And some of the stories that I've had, from our scholarship recipients, things like the women find they're able to overcome depression. They feel like they can manage anxiety a lot better, and they have the tools to do that. I've had women speak of the sense of isolation that comes with having been in a violent relationship, the camaraderie that we have in a martial arts club. So she feels connected to her community again and able to branch out and network. I've heard women talk about some of the things that I experienced. Even they began to feel more empowered in their working environment. I had one scholarship recipient say that she found her voice at work and was able to start speaking up and being heard in the way that she was being treated at work, and able to improve her work situation as well. I've had some scholarship recipients talking about reaching the point where they can now buy their own house. And that,
Oh, wow.
yeah, so those kind of life-changing things, especially when there's children involved, even though the training isn't what directly allowed them to purchase their own home, what we have is just this ability to begin moving forward from the experience that they left behind. So yeah, some really great outcomes that we're seeing from the training. And the other thing that I see a lot is that women come out the other side. They have this profound experience through the Pink Belt Scholarship, and they come out the other side very keen to kind of give back and pay it forward. So they come out the other side feeling empowered and with this new knowledge and wanting to share it and to help others. I've had one scholarship recipient start her own sort of Instagram blog to blog her journey so that she can inspire and help other people who might be in a similar situation. So from my point of view, that's incredible to think that from where she came to now be in a position where she wants to help and empower other women who might be experiencing similar issues. Amazing.
Yeah, I really like that role modeling, and I think there's a broader opportunity here for us all to role model. It could be as simple as men in martial art classes supporting women to recover, role modeling that not all men are abusive, murderous assholes, if we're blunt about it, and that support from men, I think, is probably the most powerful solution we can have to preventing violence. Domestic violence. It's really going to have to come from peer pressure from men, saying, that's just not okay. I think when we start getting that conversation happening at all levels, I think there'll be a huge shift. And I think as well, for mums getting into martial arts with their children, I think there's opportunities there for them to pick up, good role models to contrast with some of the experiences that they've had. So I think lots of opportunities here from those connections. And I really like what you said about one of the benefits is finding your voice at work. And I think even for women that maybe haven't gone through the horrors of a domestic violence relationship, I think this is a benefit that most women could benefit from. And I say that because one of the most common challenges we face when we're coaching females, executives, particularly trying to break into the C-suite, is they struggle to be authentic with the way that they communicate. To be heard, they almost have to amplify up over and above their male colleagues, because there's it's a subtle misogyny, really, and there's not an equal willingness to listen, I find. So, have you got any further thoughts on that, on the importance of finding your voice in the workplace and how this can help?
I think that was even for myself, and I haven't come from a violent background. So even for myself during that early martial arts experience, the changes that I was experiencing, I definitely felt some change in the way that I was operating at work. For me personally, martial arts allowed me to find the magic in being outside your comfort zone. And so that is really the learning that I took to my work environment. And it's a subtle thing, but I just had this sense of wanting to push outside what I thought I was capable of at work. Presented with projects or opportunities or things to take on, I had this sort of gradual increase in a sense of just feeling more like, instead of, oh no, that's not something I'm qualified to do, I'm not sure how I'll go with that, having this sense of more like, yeah, I want to have a crack at that and just see how I go. That sense of wanting to be challenged all the time is something that I most definitely took into my work environment, and I feel like I've benefited enormously from having that sense. I think is it Richard Branson that talks about just say yes and then figure out later how you're going to do it? That sort of approach more is how I feel like I can operate now as a result of my martial arts training.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the very first things we do is, particularly with very shy or anxious people, children, usually women, occasionally men, very occasionally men, is teach them the power of that explosive noise. The kiap when you break boards or when you generate maximum power. And sometimes just that single act can be liberating when somebody's been suppressing their voice for so long. Have you
Absolutely.
got a good kiap?
Yes, I have, and I developed one of those, and that is absolutely one of the key things that I think helps a woman to find her voice. Gender stereotypes and things we're always taught that women are quiet, reserved, and in the martial arts environment, it completely blows that out of the water. You're expected to do it and you're trained to do it. And once you do discover it, it's a really it's a nice feeling and very empowering. And there's another sort of part of the research and that informs the way that we approach things is in this area of primary prevention, where martial arts is very clever in the way that it challenges traditional gender stereotypes. And what you were saying about how men having a role to play, martial arts instructors are very often men. The clubs are very often run by men. So there's a great opportunity for the martial arts community, I think, to do more in this space around challenging gender stereotypes. And martial arts goes further in challenging those stereotypes. It's not just women doing something that's traditionally done by men. So AFLW does that and the women's cricket does that. Martial arts goes a step further, I think, in the way that it challenges gender stereotypes, and there's various research around this. One of them, which is familiar to the training environment, is the Ki-Up or the Ki, which encourages women to find their voice. And there's various other aspects of the martial arts training environment that challenge traditional gender stereotypes, especially when you have men and women training together. The class is organised by belt rank, not by gender. You bow to people who are senior to you, whether they're male or female. You train together. And most importantly, a lot of the self-defense techniques that you're taught don't rely on size or power. They rely on technique. So all of a sudden, men and women, in terms of their physical capabilities, become equals. So this is where what we're doing and how martial arts, I think, can really move solidly into this primary prevention space and become a very powerful ally in changing the way that our society is operating and allowing this level of violence to occur.
Yeah, I think there are some practical skills as well. I mean, people obviously think about, oh, you can defend yourself as being a practical skill for de-escalating conflict, and that's true to a certain extent. I think a much more powerful uh, way of interrupting patterns of abuse comes from that confidence and that ability to detect patterns of predatory behavior. And we talk about predators choose their victims, and they look for patterns of vulnerability. And one of the things that martial arts teaches is to be able to detect patterns of predation, of attack, real subtle stuff. Uh, so there are things there that I think can also help in that uh, early intervention, preventative mode. And you talk about inspirational females in this role, breaking those gender stereotypes. I know that you've got support from two good friends of mine, Carmen Martin and Lauren Burns, just terrific, ferocious, competitive fighters, um, world champion and Olympic gold medalist. And I've had the privilege of working with both of those guys, and just phenomenal power in the way that they operate in the world and the way that they compete. I'm curious about the sorts of values that you look for in people who might want to support the Pink Belt project. And I often ask this question because it's usually quite telling. I ask this from all sorts of people. If you were selecting somebody to join your board of the charity, and you could only ask one question, what question would you ask them?
Oh, wow. That's a really hard question. Interestingly, it's exactly the position I was in not very long ago. I recruited my first board back in October and went through that recruitment process and interviewing people and what we were looking for. I'm not sure if it came through in a specific question. It's a sense you get of a person. What I was looking for, besides the particular technical skills that I needed to fulfill on my board, first part, I guess, was that they understood what the project was about. And that didn't necessarily mean they needed any understanding of martial arts. But what it meant is they had some understanding about violence and how it operates and primary prevention, all of those types of topics. If I just go off on a slight tangent for a moment, a lot of people, when they come across Pink Belt Project, they think that we're about teaching women to fight back or to defend themselves in a violent situation. And that's not what we're about. And I often say that, our scholarship recipients walk away with some self-defense skills, but on the spectrum of benefits that they get from their scholarship, some self-defense skills is about that much. We're about the empowerment and the growth and all of those sort of wider, bigger topics rather than a few self-defense skills. And I put it this way, that we're not about empowering women to the point where they feel like they can walk down a dark street at night because they can defend themselves. We're about women thinking they're worth more than risking their personal safety by walking down that street so they won't be there in the first place. Women should be allowed to walk wherever they like without fear. And that's a whole other topic, but it's a different world to the one we currently live in. So back to your question around my board is an understanding of those issues, understanding what the project is about and where it's coming from. And then on top of that, what I quickly came to realize and didn't understand when I embarked on recruitment of the board is that lots of people like to be on boards nowadays because it looks good on your resume. What I was looking for were people who were less interested in that, but have that sense of wanting to give back to the world, to create some form of legacy, to be able to use the skills that they've developed in their professional life and use them in a way that could make the world a better place. So I guess that kind of character comes across in a range of questions. I can't off the top of my head think of a specific question that draws that out of a person, but it was something that I was able to gain even though we were conducting these interviews via Zoom. It's a sense of a person that you get as to what their motivation is for being involved in something like this.
Yeah, I like that term, sense of a person. And if I unpack that, quite often it is a felt sensation that somebody's right or they're not. And we often train people in how to interview and how to select and how to do recruitment. And there's a couple of things I strongly recommend. Always have a diverse selection panel, at least 3 people. Always have at least one experienced female on the panel with a really well developed sense of intuition. I've been saved so many times by somebody on the panel that I've been recruiting for saying, I've got an uneasy feeling about this person. And even though they seem absolutely spectacular on paper or they interview brilliantly, in your group of your three or four on your panel, you can usually work out something that's not quite right. And I have been saved so many times by having really experienced women on selection panels who've just picked up on something subtle, usually around men and eye contact, or just a subtle thing to do with no respect. And then you start digging deeper and you find that they've been dismissed from jobs and that they've got problems and there's been conflict and you name it, the list is a mile long. But just that first inkling to alert you that you need to go digging deep.
Yeah, I don't think it's probably a question to do with somebody's values, but I think a person's values seep out of them in everything they say and do and how they conduct themselves, and you can certainly pick up that kind of stuff in the way they answer their questions.
Yeah. If I've got a couple of last questions to wrap up. I've learned a lot today, and it's been fantastic. I've got one question. If you could direct people's attention to something important in the world, what would it be?
Another huge question. I like it though. I read a lot, and as I was saying, I'm a bit of a deep thinker, and I go through life picking up or coming across little concepts often from other cultures, and I sort of think of them as like these little shells on the beach that I think, oh yeah, I like that one, and put it in my pocket, and kind of find that I start to apply these little concepts to various ways that I operate, I guess, how I think about things. One concept that I came across some time ago is an African concept called Ubuntu. And it was a rather small offhand conversation with a work colleague from Botswana several years ago. And he told me about this concept, and I've since read up a little bit more about it. Ubuntu is I am because you are, is the translation of what it means. And it recognizes our shared humanity. It recognizes that we're all connected. And in practice, I guess, it is this sense of, I can't be happy if you're not happy. If you're sad, I can't be happy. And it's about recognizing other people and our shared humanity and how we're all connected. So, which tends to inspire this thinking around what can I do, what change can I make in the world that will help lift somebody else up. A high tide lifts all ships, right? So,
Great. Yeah, I very much like. There's two aspects that I particularly like. One is the connectivity, being connected, not just one to one, but one to many, and one to the whole ecosystem that we inhabit. And the other is, rather than a sense of fatalism, a very direct attention to the right now. What can you do to change, to help somebody else to have that contribution, I guess. Ubuntu, I haven't come across that before, but now I'm going to go and do some digging around.
There's a little shell for your pocket.
Definitely. Final question. We began exploring some of your early inspirations, your 40th, the cataclysmic transition over 40. I can say that I'm well over 50. What are your future aspirations? Could be work, home, elsewhere, pink belt. What's your aspirations? Where are you heading?
I feel like personal coaches would not appreciate this approach to my future goal setting. I feel like my future goals are not terribly specific. In terms of Pink Belt Project, I would of course like to see it grow. I started it and grew it in the direction it's gone because I wanted to. It's a legacy, it's something that you've contributed to the world. So to see that branch outside of Australia would be mind-blowing. So I guess that is a goal. If I think about those shells along the beach that I collect and put in my pocket, another one that I've got is a Japanese formula for happiness, which you might have come across, called ikigai. Ikigai is the intersection of something you're good at, something that makes the world a better place, and something you're passionate about. So for me, being able to ensure that whatever direction my life takes from here, that I manage to have that sense of ikigai in whatever I'm doing, I think that will lead me in the right direction. I have ideas about, it would be amazing if Pink Belt Project did move overseas, that I could, take the learnings that I have and be able to use them in parts of the world that are less fortunate, experience different cultures, understand more deeply martial arts from outside of Australia. So all of that sort of stuff. But essentially, I want a happy life. I've got teenage children. I want to see them launch into the next phase of their life successfully. But I feel like that applying that sense of ikigai to everything that you do will head me in the right direction.
Oh, wow. I've now got to go and find out about ikigai as well.
Have you not heard of that either?
I haven't, no. I like that intersection, though.
I feel very humbled that I've been able to share some things that you weren't aware of before.
Oh, fantastic. A few people have said, you're very busy. What do you want to do a podcast for? What are you podcasting for? And it boils down to it's an incredibly self-indulgent opportunity to meet interesting people and find out more about things. So ultimately it's about my own curiosity, if I'm brutally honest. And it is about sharing some of these amazing activities and people and ideas. So yeah, I really like that. I've learned a lot today. And for our listeners and viewers, you can help Kristy by sharing this podcast, by jumping onto the pinkbeltproject.com.au. Have a look at the site. If you're a martial artist running a club, if you're in our network and you're overseas in particular, hey, reach out to Kristy. There could be some fantastic opportunities here to help her grow her legacy. And what a terrific opportunity. And I look forward to following the Pink Belt Project in years to come. Thanks, Kristy.
Thanks, Ian. Enjoyed our chat. That was brilliant.
Yeah, so much fun.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Salience Podcast. Please leave us a review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe to the Frontline Mind newsletter by visiting our website at frontlinemind.com. Have you got a topic you would like some more salience on? Send us a message on LinkedIn or email team@frontlinemind.com.